make it into the top 2 on the basis of the burnout factor and the amount of crap that he took from Leeds fans for it. So I presume he's getting apologies left, right and centre from the Leeds fans, right? That's the type of people they are, Owen, right?
They look like lovely people. Seem like lovely people.
Football fans who get things wrong, they fess up straight away and they go, oh yeah, you were right about that thing, which in retrospect kind of looks a bit obvious now.
Yeah, there's a great apology culture in the 21st century, I find.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot of apologies from Manchester City fans this morning too. You were getting a lot of grief for not getting on board the Manchester City bandwagon on social media over the last 24 hours or so. Just that general sense that you wouldn't enjoy the quality of the football that's being served up to you so deliciously.
No, I don't think it was actually me who made that point, was it? I think it was Stephen Doyle here yesterday who got to the point where he's actually not getting bored, but it's not as exhilarating as some people.
You couldn't enjoy it because of the money. That was
sorry, with the celebrations and stuff like that. That was as much to do with the fact that they're missing the one trophy that they really want to win as well. That you didn't actually get the full outpouring of joy because A, they're a relatively plastic club, and B, they don't want to actually win that trophy. If they could win one in particular, it wouldn't be that one, it would be the Champions League.
And the point about the whole Champions League is today the New York Times are reporting that there's a good chance that Man City might be banned for a season if the investigation into financial fair play eventually wraps up, and they're expecting it to wrap up in the next week or so. That one of the potential and most likely outcomes is that there'll be a recommendation that Man City miss a season in the Champions League either this year or next year. Now obviously as soon as that happens, an appeal will be lodged with the Court of Arbitration for Sport or whoever hears that first round of appeal, but it will go all the way to the Court of Arbitration for Sport on one side or the other. And it's just a little caveat, a little asterisk beside their perfect season.
Yes, it is. It's an asterisk beside everything they've done to date, and Manchester City fans will rightfully get into the realms of whataboutery in this, because I'm sure that they're not the only football club in the world to have allegations of, I guess, misplacing funds or deliberately trying to put things into different places to make sure that their financial fair play is looking a little bit more fair. So they will appeal this heavily, they've said. The Football League's documents that we've seen, if that information turns out to be true, is fairly damning. It is in breach of what exactly the rules are brought in to stop against or to prevent. So they're in a bit of trouble here by the sounds of things, according to Terry Panya's piece on the New York Times.
Yeah, so we'll get to that a little bit later on as well. The other thing that we should be talking about really is Off the Wall, our Game of Thrones podcast, which is riding high on the charts.
Is it? Yeah, good to hear that it's actually doing the business. Because really the only reason we started is that Tommy and me can actually just watch Game of Thrones after we do the show on a Monday and not do any work. There's
not a lot of work done on a Monday. Tuesday shows tend to be, we'll have a 45-minute interview with somebody. Perfect. That works.
I'm really looking forward to today's 45 minutes.
Me too, I am too, but it's funny how they always show up on the Tuesday after a Game of Thrones.
Well, I think chilled out Tuesdays is what we call them.
Do we warn people that for the next 30 seconds there's going to be spoilers? Esquire had a great story about the opening scene where Varys is talking to the kid that you guys didn't mention in your podcast.
What was when they were talking to the kid who, spoiler alert, is inevitably dies in brutal circumstances?
Yeah, so the kid, her job was to go in to check and see if somebody had been eating. She's not eating anything. We'll try again later. What were they trying to do? How did Varys kill Jon Arryn?
I totally forgot this. How did
Varys kill Jon Arryn in the first season? The original hand of Robert Baratheon?
Yeah, it was poisoning. He tried to poison...
Master Pycelle thought he poisoned him.
Tried to poison Daenerys. And I actually did see that on Twitter last night. I didn't realise it was an Esquire article. And now that you mentioned it,
I didn't know either.
We messed up.
Well, it was like, it's too subtle, particularly at this stage, right? Where it's like dragon, crash, rocks falling, spear through the heart of a dragon. You're like, okay, everything's fairly obvious at this stage. They're laying it out for us so we don't miss anything. And there's like all this subtle language. No, come on.
Well, I think they've gone beyond the point of subtlety. They
were too subtle with this. I didn't know that.
Exactly. That's why we're not trained to actually.
No, we're brain dead.
Things.
Come on.
Exactly. We're just looking for dragonfire and mystical creatures. That's all we're looking for these days. And I guess we've all become stupid people by accepting that this is the direction that the show has gone down.
Yeah. Good or bad?
You can't say it was a bad episode because they've spent literally millions of dollars on it. But
well, you can say the writing was crap, or if that's what you think, you're totally entitled to. It looked great. It was like the dragon was never better realised. The scenes were never more delicately wrought. But I was disappointed with the fight between the Hound and Clegane.
It looked spectacular, though.
It didn't, like, in fairness, the ending is pretty good. The ending is great. Actually, the ending redeemed itself.
The horse.
No, the eyeballs.
Oh, of the fight. Yeah, it was good. Like I thought it was a very good episode, but I think I'm one of the very positive people around this particular series. Like Andy came in last week and castigated it. This week he's kind of rolled back a little bit. I thought the Battle of Winterfell was overrated, but I thought Sunday night's episode was again probably the best episode of the season. I think they backed it up with their 2 best episodes of the season over the last 2 weeks.
Loads of random crap though. The battle that Jamie gets involved, the duel that Jamie gets involved in, not to give any more spoilers away at this stage, before he goes and meets Cersei, is like, what's the point of this?
Well, the point of it is just to
slow him down.
Yeah.
Get out.
Well, like the point is to kill off what they perceive to be a very, very important character, and to a lot of us, that character was actually pointless, completely pointless, a crap villain.
They could have just killed him with the dragon.
They could have just killed.
It looked like he was dead.
They could have killed a lot of things with the dragon, Ger. They've strung this whole thing out by giving the dragon varying degrees of strength.
Yeah. So
one episode it's a good dragon, one episode it's a bad dragon, one episode it's absolutely pointless and has no ability to destroy anything at all.
Some people have asbestos skin in certain episodes, and then in other episodes the skin doesn't exist at all.
And spoiler alert, one episode the dragon can kill everything, including civilians, and destroy everybody and everything that you ever believed in.
Yeah. So that's our Game of Thrones chat is over now. We should get into the papers because we've got a really busy show for you today. Okay, here's what's coming up. Sorry, yeah. Going to bring in the sports pages now. A bit of Tommy Walsh goodness at 8:10. Michael Lyster is going to join us in studio at 8:15. Should we have a tiered GAA championship? There's already that debate going this morning. We'll bring you some details on that a little bit later on as well. Some Andy Robertson goodness coming your way at 8:50. Keith Andrews as well before 9 o'clock this morning. Sports news. And then Conlon versus Nikitin. It's live. So this is the rematch from the Rio Olympics. The one that ultimately made Michael Conlon the absolute global superstar that he is. They both ended up signing with Top Rank. Press conference 1 o'clock tomorrow at Balmoral, Belfast, open to the public. Looking forward to announcing my opponent and day tomorrow. I'm sure everyone will be happy with this one. Hashtag the Conlon Revolution. Is this, because they're announcing it in Ireland, do we think the fight's going to be in Ireland? Is that what the rumours around this are? Or do they just always fight in the States because that's where the money is? I guess we'll find out at 1 o'clock today. Or maybe Phil knows that already and he'll let us know from outside. Time now for the papers. Okay, going to start with the Times this morning. It's Kevin McStay, provincial championships nearing an end. And then they also have an interview with James McCarthy. McCarthy definitely brushes aside all talk of a Dublin 5 in a row. How do they survive not talking about 5 in a row all the time? This is the thing, right? Seasoned watchers of sport think that 5 in a row in GAA is too much because it's too much. That's the limit. Because mostly your buddies, your pals, your supporters in the street talk about nothing else.
Sorry, what's your point? That's why we're all talking about 5 in a row is because everybody in the street is talking about 5 in a row.
No, that you can't do it because the players keep getting tormented by it.
Well, that's not the kind of end reason why it might not happen. It'll be because another team comes along that's good enough to stop them, or because they might mess up themselves. But it's the reason why they mess up because there's too much pressure on them because people are on the street.
Yes,
I don't know.
That's the logic. We got there eventually.
Like you're obviously being sarcastic.
Not really. So the whole point is that you think this is the best team in the country, right? And that they've already won their 5 in a row was already stopped. Now they're in the middle of a 7 in a row or whatever it is. And so no team is actually good enough to beat them.
Yes.
So the only thing that's going to beat them is
themselves.
Some kind of frailty, psychological frailty, which there's been no sign of to date at any point, even when they've been trailing deep into stoppage time. And so that frailty comes from the constant nitpicking, the constant barrage of attention. Then, in fairness, it must be a little bit overwhelming.
It must be. I'm not sure actually if it has to be completely overwhelming for them. I'm sure they might get a little bit annoyed here or there, but why hasn't it happened to them before? The wave of Dublin becoming
so far ahead of everybody,
becoming unbelievably successful again. this sort of stuff has been spoken about for a while now. The idea of becoming the best team in the country, the idea of distancing Dublin from the rest after years and years in the doldrums, where Dublin were a bit behind the rest. Like, that comes with its own set of circumstances, its own hype. They got to their first All Ireland final in 2011 since 1995. Let's not forget, it wasn't just their first All Ireland win since '95. It was their first All Ireland. Like, they managed to handle that hype pretty well. I think they can handle this hype just to the same level. I think it's nonsense that the hype will get to this Dublin team, and that'll be the reason why the 5 in a row doesn't happen. It will be because of a team good enough to beat them.
Well, they're not underdogs for that game against Kerry?
But it's still Dublin in an All-Ireland final. There's a difference between
being underdogs and overwhelming favourites to do a thing that no team in history has ever done.
It's different for sure.
The scale of those achievements are very different.
Well, they aren't. I mean, it depends where you're coming from. Like, they've been favourites for the last 4 years. They go into every All-Ireland with an increase in pressure and an increase in pressure and an increase in pressure. And sure, this 5 in a row is a very, very special thing. I think it will happen. And I think it's because a lot of these players ultimately are resistant to that. Like, have you heard of anybody speak about the pressures of being a Dublin footballer in the last couple of years?
Who's going to say it?
Well, former footballers. There's already been a couple of retirements.
Yeah, but they're all...
Or there's at least a little glance into what they really think.
Right? So you think there's no chance of it happening? We should stop talking about the Gaelic Football Championship this year?
When did I say that?
Do you think there's any chance of it happening?
I don't think it will happen.
Right. Go on, what's in the...
No, I don't think they will be stopped, but the 5 in a row will happen. The Irish Independent goes with Dub selector Kennedy faces lengthy ban, disruptive conduct charge on the cards for former Galway hurler after bizarre Nolan Park incident. I might become a professional. The story of the unemployed 46-year-old debutant Waterford goalkeeper, that's Darren Mulhern, who played in the Munster Football Championship against Clare at the weekend. And O'Gara makes next move as Van Gran insists nothing is amiss at Munster. It seems Ronan O'Gara is going to go to La Rochelle.
Yeah, you should get suspended if you walk onto the field of play and interfere, right?
You should do, and he will do.
That's the right thing.
It is the right thing, and it's definitely going to happen. Now,
we should stop mentors from coming onto the field because it creates a dangerous situation. It's precedent. It's like these games, you need to lay down the law and say you cannot walk onto the field of play and interfere with what's happening. Because if this starts happening, here's the thing: if the ban is 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever, what's to stop the guy standing beside the umpire from getting out and touching the ball over the crossbar with a minute left to go in a game? Where does it stop?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the sanctity of the playing field is supposed to be the sanctity of the playing field.
Well, Colin Keys is making that point in the Indo this morning, and John Fogarty is making the point in the Examiner this morning that it probably needs to be scaled back. It definitely needs to be scaled back in terms of the role of the Mayor Forna, this mystical creature that is allowed to just crawl onto the pitch. There was talks years ago, well, by years ago I mean like around 2006, that they would get rid of this entirely and that it might just be the manager in a technical area and all that sort of thing, and that there was a good bit of blowback from Kilkenny, especially because the GAA apparently didn't realise the pressures of being a selector with an inter-county team. And Colin Keys does make the very valid point. Jurgen Klopp didn't exactly need a Mayor Forna running onto the pitch at Anfield last week. Like, noisy scenarios are just a part of sport. Communicating messages, doing that before the game or at half-time is the challenge. Or maybe if you want to be cute about it, allow your medical team to do so if somebody is genuinely injured, whatever it may be. But yeah, we're going to see a ban here for Greg Kennedy, and it's a deserved one. But
you had some sympathy for him.
Yes, we had a bit of an argument out in the office yesterday, Tommy and I. Sympathy is probably the wrong word, because I do believe he should be banned. But they were. I'm sure there's a bit of a rush to kind of condemn how disgraceful this action was. First of all, let us remember what actually happened here. He caught a ball. Selectors have done far worse things. There was a video that did the rounds there last year, the year before, of a selector who actually shouldered a player out of the way, who actually physically confronted another player, which is worse. Granted, just while I'm going through this, I'm not for 1 second actually standing up for the guy. I'm just saying we need to keep a little bit of perspective here. We also need to keep into perspective the fact that the referee had his back turned to play. TJ Reid took a quick free. That free would have been brought back if that Kilkenny player actually caught the ball, or it should have been brought back. It would have actually been not as bad, but it would have been bad had the referee allowed that play to progress and Kilkenny put the ball over the bar. There's no way a quick free should have been allowed in that situation, especially because the referee was speaking to Chris Crummy at the time. So you're taking a defender out of the picture, taking a defender away from the possibility of actually stopping the short free. He should be banned. He should be banned.
You're totally defending the action, though. That's all. Oh, but that's why he did what he did.
There's more nuance to the idea than there's a good and there's a bad, and that's exactly it. It was a bad thing to do, don't get me wrong. but there are degrees of badness, sure. You have to accept that.
Yeah, and so that's why the disciplinary process exists. There are different scales of what you get suspended for, but like any tolerance of players, of somebody who isn't a player getting involved in the playing of the game, like how do you know the referee would have called it back? How do you know the referee wouldn't have just turned around and gone, yeah, okay, fair enough?
Well, I think that would have been unfair in Dublin.
But like, that's up for the referee to decide. That's not for the Dublin selector to decide, and that's not for us to.
I know it's not. I know it's
we don't know what happened in the future.
And I'm not saying that. Yes, he was right to take it into his hands. He was wrong to do what he did.
Would you have done the same thing?
I'm just saying No, I wouldn't. I'm just saying let's keep it in perspective here. It's not a disgraceful act.
You said disgraceful. You're the only person who used the word disgraceful. It's like that's a straw man where it's just like no one thinks it's disgraceful. It's like, but you can't do it. It's like the worst form of intervention, and you're going to start seeing, like, imagine this is the GAA, right? So there'll be under 14 games where there'll be dads running out and catching balls and going, wow, I'm going to take my 6 month suspension.
Really?
Why not? Like, why not? And yes, of course there will. Anyway, the Sun.
I'm looking forward to that development at underage hurling, where there's just parents, like they're bringing a rule where you're allowed 2 parents to kick the ball for certain games and stuff.
Ringers.
Yeah, that'd be the way the game should go.
Shock for champions. Ban City. UEFA panel will push for Champ League axe, and then club to get the Reddies. There you go. I was looking at it. Red dies. Anyway, Reddies. Club to get the Reddies. Liverpool have vowed to back Jurgen Klopp with all the millions he needs to land the title. All the millions. Spurs 10 million loan for Bale. This is Owen's dream scenario from yesterday. It was like, what if? Could Gareth Bale end up back there? I mean, maybe he's the one that they need to put bums on seats. He would get north of 600 grand a week at Real, but would have to accept less than half elsewhere. So Real will take an offer where the club pays 250 grand a week for Bale's wages plus a 10 million fee for the season. I mean, if you know Real Madrid have no interest in playing him again, you sit there and you wait and you wait and you wait and you wait and you wait, and that's like 11:59 on the transfer deadline. You go, here's our offer, and that's it. Why would you give him 10 million now? Who else is going to give 10 million for Gareth Bale? Inter Milan, Juventus.
I think the list is longer than just Spurs. I think it's a risky move waiting until the end of the summer. I know you made the point that Gareth Bale perhaps has no interest in playing high level football. Given he's got that, he's got 3 years left in his deal.
Yeah,
it's a long time. The Irish Examiner goes with, I don't think anything is going on. That's a quote from Johan van Graan, who rubbishes talk of rift as Flannery and Jones depart. John McHenry says playing second fiddle to revitalise Tiger won't sit well with Rory. The USPGA Championship is this weekend. Mike Work is writing about coaching and kids. It says, step outside your sporting comfort zone to see life through a child's eyes.
Gavin, FAI staff are rattled. This is a Paul Lennon story. League of Ireland chief Fran Gavin has admitted that FAI staff have been rattled by the deepening crisis at the football body. Speaking at the launch of the new Unite Union Champions Cup competition to be staged in November between the title winners from both sides of the border, Gavin gave an insight into morale at the association. And then Ole plays it cool. Sorry. Man United are preparing 145 million double swoop for Kalidou Koulibaly and Nicolas Pepe. Will they get them both?
Well, you'd imagine, even at this point, Manchester United is an attractive proposition for a Napoli and a Lille player, which they are respectively, that it is still a step up for them in terms of their career. Certainly it will be financially. Koulibaly has been somebody that's been linked with Premier League clubs for quite some time now in terms of being a reliable option, perhaps at centre-back. Manchester United need somebody in that position. They also need somebody in several other positions, and the gossip columns are going to be filled with Manchester United links every single morning between now and transfer deadline day.
It's true. Just one point on this. Dublin selector Greg Kennedy could be facing a ban for the controversial catch that's a Michael Kenya goal chant in Saturday's Leinster Championship match at Nolan Park, is the Carlo Kane story in the back of the Star this morning. Tommy Walsh made a good point that in the early throw-in on Sunday, the Waterford supporters didn't really get behind Waterford. It was that dead heat of the afternoon. It was too early for them, and Waterford needed to be in front, or they needed to start a row. And he said he felt the same at Nolan Park on Saturday night until Greg Kennedy intervened, which got everybody in the crowd outraged and made Kilkenny suddenly get their dander up. And from that point on, the match swung. The momentum that you love swung back in favour of...
You're the one who mentioned momentum.
Swung back in favour of Kilkenny.
Or, to play into your idea, momentum didn't play any part at all, and it was actually to do with perhaps a couple of tactical shifts, to do with Kilkenny getting their act together in the second half. Perhaps a selector catching a ball had nothing to do with Kilkenny actually winning the game on Saturday, and they were actually the better team over the course of the 70 minutes. I know it's a completely out of this world idea, but perhaps that's actually the reason, because I heard that point being made in Sky Sports the other day as well. And of course Brian Cody was enraged with him at that moment, and you shouldn't poke a cat.
And the crowd didn't matter, and the crowd didn't get involved and didn't turn Nolan Park back into the bear pit that it used to be.
I know. This is not what you're saying, but if anybody actually thinks that Kilkenny wouldn't have won that game had Greg Kennedy not handled that ball, I think you're out of your mind. Like, it's,
the games don't have turning points.
Of course, the turning point. I don't think this selector catching a ball was the turning point in this game. I think the turning point would be that Kilkenny are actually still a better hurling team than Dublin, and they were going to win this game regardless.
Dublin were going pretty well at the time.
They were going pretty well at the time. They sure were. They sure were. This was, I just don't like. Again, I'm not defending the guy, but I just think the whole idea of how important this was has been overplayed a small bit. The back page of the Herald is Rory's a huge plus. Prodigal Dub in good shape, says James McCarthy, and FAI staff rattled by scandals, says Gavin.
Okay, so the Times Ireland edition. Again, staff rocked by recent FAI turmoil is the John Fallon story. Brighton looked to Potter after Houghton axed Graham Potter, the Swansea City manager, will be interviewed for the job at Brighton and Hove Albion within the next 24 hours. Didn't realise that Chris Houghton had nothing really to do with the recruitment policy at Brighton, so he must be feeling a little bit pissed off with the quality of players that he had to deal with, that he managed to get through 2 seasons in the Champions League, or in the Premier League. And then O'Gara agrees to join La Rochelle staff. Agrees is in inverted commas there, so that's Kieran O'Reilly's story. He's going to be the replacement for Xavier Garbajosa, and he's going to be linking up again with John O'Gibbs. So La Rochelle's a very nice, chichi part of France where you'd be living on the beach. It's a nice lifestyle.
Have you been?
Yeah, it's a beautiful part of the world.
Everybody just obviously gets the ferry there and drives through it, but there's obviously stuff to see there as well.
No.
Doesn't the ferry go into La Rochelle?
No.
I'm thinking of a completely different place.
Le Havre.
I don't know. I thought
maybe
La Rochelle is on. Can you not get like a Cork to La Rochelle ferry?
Maybe you can.
I don't know. That's
Yeah, you used to be able to Cork La Rochelle. Jeez, I didn't. No, it's like a beautiful part of the world.
It's on the west coast, isn't it?
Yeah, it's on the Atlantic coast. Can you get the ferry to there? I don't know if you can or not. Cork to Roscoff. Cork to La Rochelle is like the train and the boat and the... Anyway.
Now, Cork to Roscoff makes sense. Back page of the Irish Daily Mail is Ole flips at flops. He's so upset with Stars he cancels his season review, and Munster did everything to keep duo. That's the latest line from the camp down in Munster.
That was so bad we're not going to talk about it. Doesn't seem like the best way for them to move forward at Man United. Ole's £125 million United rebuild, and that's not a lot of money these days. That's they think that it's going to get you, is it the same players that we're talking about here? Koulibaly and Pepe, yeah. And title pain is forgotten as Van der Vaart eyes Euro glory, and FAI workers are rattled by Debac.
The other kind of piece of transfer news that would have been inside the Star this morning is that Manchester United could be going in for Adrien Rabiot from Paris Saint-Germain, 200 grand a week he's looking for, and Barcelona have already kind of turned their noses up at that, so Manchester United linked with him. The back page of The Guardian is greatest of all time. They asked a question about this Manchester City team, comparing them with the likes of Chelsea in 05-06, Arsenal 03-04, the Tottenham team of 60-61, Manchester United 67-68, and Liverpool all the way from 75 to 83. And then Jamie Jackson's story here is a long road back. Herrera says Manchester United must look to Liverpool for inspiration. Okay, the Racing Post for me is hands off. Lock-and-Chope Lawrence is a filly money can't buy, says owner Dance. So owner John Dance has revealed he's resisted overtures from the huge bloodstock empires to keep hold of Lawrence, who's reportedly better than ever before her return to action on Saturday. General 5-1 second favourite for the Lock-in Stakes at Newbury has earned £1.48 million in prize money since he bought her for $220,000 as a yearling. So that's not a bad bit of profit. And then, she'll have some offspring, and hopefully those offspring will be good and you'll get loads of money for those too. Final newspaper for me is the Daily Telegraph, and their sports section leads with a photograph of Chris Hughton. Brighton rocked is the headline. Hughton brutally sacked with Swansea's Potter set to take over. Okay, we have an Irish news I think for you this morning as well. It's about time we played our football, says Grugan, and Johnson ruled out for Down. And the New York Times is the only other thing that we should have talked about really this morning. Tariq Panja has a story in it.
saying UEFA investigators want to boot Manchester City out of the Champions League. So they're seeking a ban for at least one season as a result of, this is weird. So Man City have already paid a fine for breaching financial fair play rules. About 60 million quid was the fine, which seems weird given that the whole point of financial fair play is that you're not supposed to be able to buy yourself into success. If you can buy yourself out of the trouble that you've caused, then what's the point of it? But anyway, they did that, and that was supposed to be the end of that. But after the Football Leaks documents came out, it appeared as if Manchester City had been creating a network of different ways to try, and this is what the allegations coming from Football Leaks said, to try and find different ways to get out of the case and to also make sure that they were able to continue to pay players what they wanted to, and somehow it not necessarily appear on the books. Manchester City deny all of this, of course, so we need to stress that they deny all of this, and they said there's an orchestrated campaign against them. But what the current recommendations coming out, according to Tariq Panja, are, it's not that they be found guilty for the original sin, it's that actually the documents that they provided in the first case weren't accurate. So it's kind of a technicality that in breaching these rules and then in saying that they didn't breach the rules, the documentation that they used to prove that they hadn't breached the rules was incorrect. So it's like filing an incorrect tax return. I suppose maybe it is almost the same as the original sin, but it's not the original sin that they're getting banned for, it's the cover-up. And the recommendation, it looks like, is going to be, these things, they come out before they're actually made official. Somebody has spoken to Tariq Panja. Obviously, it's a very well-sourced story, and you wonder if that's a kite being flown by somebody saying, what would the response from the rest of the world be if we were to say, let's ban Manchester City, the best team in Europe, from Europe's best competition? What would happen?
Yeah.
I think you're going to have like every club in Europe going, well, every club in Europe bar the guilty ones going, yeah, kick them out. And it'll be interesting to see who's on their side. Yeah,
I would suspect there wouldn't be too many on their side. Like if you sat all the chairmen of all the big clubs in Europe around the table right now and asked them to say, are you happy that Manchester City are doing well, or are you nonplussed, or are you sad? I think most of them would be nonplussed at the very least. I think they're still viewed as the football outsiders, that they've brought their way into the situation, as have all their peers around Europe. Let's face it, they've all got big money to spend. But Manchester City's acceleration has been a lot quicker, and you're not one of us, you can't sit with us, is how they view Manchester City.
If you're guilty of the same thing, though, or you don't want them thrown out at all.
Well, that's the thing.
We need some sympathy for these guys.
Well, that's the thing, but...
Yeah, it's just some documentation. This is just form filling, that's all.
Or just get the football leaks and make sure nothing ever gets leaked ever again.
Well, they apparently, in the New York Times story, it says that they found the guy in Portugal. I'd missed that part of the story.
Yeah, I don't know where he is right now, or who he's at the mercy of, but...
One of the other things in the stories in the papers this morning is obviously what's going to happen to Manchester United. Paul Pogba is the lightning rod around the Manchester United fans, and Patrice Evra has been chatting to Gary Neville on Sky Sports this morning. He thinks Pogba is getting way too much slack from the fans, and that there's another player who deserves it a bit more.
I have nothing against him but Sanchez. When I saw the deal of Sanchez, that's when I say the Man United history just go down. Because he had Manchester City. They were offering, of course, less money, but he was going to play a better football than Man United. I'm sorry about that, because City playing a better football. The manager, Guardiola, so he will improve. So I want to know which reason, for real, he go to Manchester United, you know. Don't tell me he go because he loved Manchester United when he was kid, or it's two reasons. Maybe the money, and also because maybe he want to be the number one. You know, he go to Manchester, he say he's not any big player, he will take the number 7 and be the star. So that's why it's not like I'm protecting Paul. But when people, like yesterday, you know, the incident happened with the fan, they're killing Paul. He's the best scorer, best assist. I know you can maybe question sometimes his leadership and everything. Maybe the last few games you want Paul to score the winning goal. So that's why maybe people criticize Paul right now. But he's been the best player of the season. But just because it's Paul Pogba, he's doing his haircut, his dance, his Instagram and everything, people will just criticize him, but they forget the player it is.
Yeah, Patrice Evra throwing Alexis Sanchez under the bus. It's hard to take Patrice Evra serious after he kissed the chicken breast.
He didn't just kiss the chicken breast. He had a rather lewd relationship with the chicken, I think.
It's hard, isn't it?
It's fair to say. It's very, very, very tough to...
The mental image is difficult to shake.
It's also very tough to get that image out of my head now that you've reminded me of that.
No, chicken breast, like.
I thought you were going to say it's hard to take him seriously after some of his performances in the ITV studio last summer, which is also true, but the chicken breast thing was far worse. Like when you talk about Alexis Sanchez being thrown under the bus, I don't think Patrice ever actually needs to grab him and shove him in front of the bus. I think like he's actually placed himself under that bus fairly squarely himself by kind of a chain of really, really poor performances on the back of an outstanding performance from his agent in terms of getting him that contract.
Did you hear the bit about at the training ground, wherever he would stand in training, there was a door, and inside the door there was a fridge, and so he'd be cold at training, so they moved the fridge for him. Did you read that bit?
Sanchez?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was like, maybe just tell him to warm up a little bit, he's a professional athlete. But without, they were like, oh yeah, of course, we'll definitely fix that.
Because he's obviously in the sunny climes of Manchester during the Premier League season, which predominantly takes place in winter. The fridge was making are you sure it wasn't like a cryotherapy chamber or something like that?
It could have been something like that, but like it wasn't, it wasn't so cold that anybody else had complained about it ever.
That's an absolutely extraordinary... I completely missed that. I hope it's true now, because I hadn't actually seen that piece of information. Like, they do a Gareth Bale in this, don't they, Manchester United? As in, they take whatever sort of financial... any sort of money they can get to take some of Alexis Sanchez off their books. Just make sure he just doesn't have to show up anymore.
If you're a League of Ireland team, do you like kind of...
Pay him more to sit at home.
Here, listen, Man United, can we have him? We'll take him off your books.
Like that, I think even the presence of Alexis Sanchez at this point is almost as damaging as the financial impact that he's having, because it's the two things married together. When his teammates see this guy, like,
it's whatever he's just said. It's like, hang on a second, this is nonsense.
Yeah.
And so everybody in the dressing room thinks that. It's like, he's not trying to leg it. He's getting paid 5 times more than I am.
Yeah. Like it's a shambles of a situation for you to be a teammate of Alexis Sanchez in that dressing room at the moment. Like the thing is, okay, like, who is that football club that actually said to Alexis Sanchez, come and bring your talents to wherever we are? Like, realistically, if he stays in the Premier League, who is he playing for now?
Like, maybe one of the teams who are coming up decides to take a punt and put some bums on seat for the first 5 or 6 games of the season, and the season ticket sales outweigh the whatever. Say you've got to pay him 150 of the 450 or whatever it is a week. It's still upsetting the balance of your changing room and upsetting the balance of your... spending, it doesn't make any sense. Like, so it has to be a different country, and I mean, there's a good chance at this stage that it might have to be back at home, right? That he has to go home and just kind of be the returning superstar, and that's fine. Like, it'll be a great end to a career, or maybe he just retires and gives up the money. Nah,
he goes to China.
Not a chance.
He goes to China at some point.
Yeah, maybe China's the only place that you could. But is that money real anymore? Are they all getting paid? Is that all? Like, is that house of cards not about to come crumbling down?
I'm sure it is, but Alexis Sanchez has found a way of enduring a falling house of cards quite well. He will do a Carlos Tevez eventually, though, and go home, and he'll kind of be
good again.
He'll be welcomed home as a hero.
Didn't Carlos Tevez get good again when he went home?
He did actually.
For a while. All right, here we are speaking on last night's Off the Ball. Dave McIntyre gave us his take on why landing top 4 for Manchester United won't be that big a deal for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer.
Do you really think they've been spineless?
Oh, I do. I think in the last month or so, they've been absolutely spineless. They've been incapable of raising themselves to perform. Like, the stats show, and the league table shows, that United have missed out on the Champions League by 5 points. Mm-hmm. A wretched season in which they've lost 10 times, and they've won 2 of their last 10. And they only lost out on Champions League football by 5 points. So they're actually, when he talks about next season, it's all about top 4. You're only 5 points off top 4.
Yeah.
So that is not a huge achievement. To finish 4th next season is not an achievement, given that you've barely missed out on it this season, having been so awful. The other thing I would take from it is that I think Solskjaer has been given a free pass with the coverage over the last 3 or 4 weeks, but particularly yesterday when things got... yesterday was the nadir, where you're losing 2-0 at home in your final game to a team that's already been relegated. That all the talk is about the clear out, all the talk is about the work that needs to be done at the club from the top down, get a technical director or a director of football installed over the summer, make sure you look at your recruitment policy and how big decisions are made in the club. But the fact is, he has been, since the PSG game, he's been absolutely incapable of getting anything out of that group of players. There's no question that if the board had held off on making the appointment, which they absolutely should have done. Never before have Manchester United been in a position where the board had time to make an appointment. Normally you feel they think we need to get the building blocks in place as soon as possible, depending on the circumstances. This was one set of circumstances where that was not applicable. They could have waited till June. It's not like any other club was going to come in and poach Ole Gunnar Solskjaer from under their noses.
Yeah.
So he was always going to be there, hanging on them, coming to him with a permanent contract. There's no doubt that if they'd held off on making this appointment in June, he would not get the job. They are now looking at a manager that they do not want.
That's Dave McIntyre raining some truth bombs down on Manchester United. I'm delighted to say Keith Andrews is on the line for us this morning. Keith, how you doing?
Morning, lads. How things?
Yeah, very good, very good. The Championship playoffs are in full swing. West Brom, a former club of yours, a little bit up against it against Villa tonight?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, Dave. The way they set up in the first game was all about containing, was all about playing like a system that was going to try and nullify what Villa had, mainly Grealish and McGinn in midfield. Played a 5-4-1 system, played very, very deep, looked dangerous on the counter. Like when you get your goal and you take the lead, then you have to say the game plan is working. But Conor Horan came on for Glenn Whelan, and then the game plan went out the window, really. Conor's goal was made by Jack Grealish in particular because he attracted 2-3 bodies around and created a little bit of space for Conor, and he finished it with some aplomb, didn't he?
Yeah. Is like if Villa were to go up, either way, you have to assume Jack Grealish is one of the hottest prospects in English football this summer and one of the most sought after.
Yeah, I think take Liverpool and Man City out of the equation. I think he can play for any other Premier League team. I think he's that good. I think the talent has always been there, but and what you've had in the last 12 to 18 months, I would suggest, has been a professionalism around his game. And he seems to be taking it very, very seriously. You can even see in his body shape and how fit he is, how strong he is. Still picked up a little bit of a niggle, which sometimes obviously you can't do anything about. But I just think he's leading his life the right way, and the effects are spectacular. I think he's turning into quite a special player that we probably all assumed he would, but he has obviously came off that track once or twice with some off-field skirmishes. But he's a smashing player, Jay. Yeah,
you get the sense that Villa will get one season out of him if they go up right now, but otherwise he'll be gone, right?
Yeah, look, only for the takeover last summer, he was gone. He was definitely gone. And James Chester also would have been gone. That was lined up to go to Stoke for a decent amount of money. That's where they were financially. The takeover happens in the middle of pre-season, and then the goalposts change. I think Jack Grealish doesn't have to go. He didn't particularly want to go, I don't think, from what I hear. He's obviously Aston Villa through and through. So I think his genuine dream is to get Aston Villa back into the Premier League. And let's not pull any punches. They are a major, major force in English football. They just need to take that step. But taking that step back into the Premier League clearly isn't that easy.
The other thing that we wanted to talk to you about this morning was Leeds and Derby. So Leeds have a 1-0 lead after the first leg, but you were kind of on this train a long way back, even I think last October, November, just that the intensity involved for Leeds was going to be very difficult for them to maintain over the course of the absolute warfare that is the Championship, and you were dead right.
It's a war of attrition, isn't it? And I had concerns. I was blown away by what he achieved with that set of players. That set of players finished 13th last season. So when you add Patrick Bamford, Barry Douglas, the only two real signings into that equation for financial, for money, and they've been injured large parts of the season. So always had concerns about whether they'll be able to sustain it for a full season, mainly because of his training methods. You know, the game in terms of the game that he wants to play, if you're resting in between, if you're taking things training-wise moderate, I think you can possibly sustain it. But they didn't. They lost 11 of the last 23 games in the league. They only had 1 point out of 4 going into the playoffs. So there was huge concern about what they would produce in the playoffs against a Derby team who were playing very, very well. But to be fair to them, they were outstanding. I thought they controlled the game against Derby, barring 10-15 minutes at the start and then possibly a little spell in the second half with Derby towards the end. We're looking live. There's a few contentious refereeing decisions. But no, I think Leeds are certainly in the driving force for tomorrow evening.
Right, okay. Accepting the fact that they will probably make 2 or 3 signings at the very least if they do get promoted, Keith. I think we're all attached to this nostalgic idea of Leeds United being back in the top tier. How long would they last up there?
Oh, was it 15, 16 years the last time we were there. I think it's, when you look at both of them, look, obviously we've seen a couple of comebacks in the last couple of weeks. We can't discard West Brom or Derby because I think they're both capable. They have the personnel to upset the apple cart, if you like. But I think when you're looking at it, the playoff final, that most fans, most neutrals want would be Aston Villa against Leeds because they were two teams. Anybody in and around my age would say they grew up supporting or following or knowing so much about Leeds and Aston Villa. They were always that club, probably below the main 2, 3, 4 clubs. And Villa at times, of course, were right up in the equation for winning the Premier League right at the start. So I think Leeds, if they did get back up, I think the infrastructure is certainly there. We know the fan base is there. But of course, the same can be said about Aston Villa.
Yeah. At this stage, who do you think is actually the most likely team to go up?
I think it's going to be a Villa-Leeds final. And I think if Leeds bring their A game, I think it beats Villa's A game. But I'm not sure they have their A game left. I was impressed with them at the weekend against Derby. But it still wasn't the scintillating, free-flowing, absolute control of a football game that we've seen for the first 3, 4, 5 months of the season until they hit that rut and they couldn't seem to finish teams off. They've had an issue in both the boxes. Defensively, they haven't been as good. And at the opposite end, Kemar Roof coming back is going to be a massive, massive plus for them. But they haven't been as clinical as they were in the early parts of the season.
Yeah, it's been a remarkable few weeks for football, but I think at this time of the year, everybody would do well to remember the second legs of the Championship playoff and then the playoff final at Wembley tends to produce some of the most exciting, batshit crazy football that you see year after year.
Yeah, they're bonkers. Like, they really are, because there's so many scenarios in place that if you do go up, your personal contract, it goes up or it stays the same. Players will want to leave if they don't get promoted. Some will still want to leave. I think West Brom is a prime example of that. Obviously got relegated last season. They come down, and I think it's fairly evident that some of the players don't really want to be there, and I think it's been a shame. I think Darren Moore's paid the price for that in a way. And then obviously the football club, the backroom team, the Villa were in such financial trouble up until that takeover. So last year you felt it was now or never for Villa, and then it was going to be a complete rebuild. Obviously the takeover happens, they can go again, and they have the financial muscle to be able to compete in the market. But there's so many ramifications. They are intriguing games, and certainly the finals, when you're at them, you can sense the edginess, you can sense the nerves. It's not like a normal cup final. They really are a bit different.
Keith, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Nathan Murphy has a trophy that he hands out every year. It's called the Green Boot or the Emerald Boot. We haven't decided which yet. It's for the top scorer in the Premier League who's Irish, and this year, unfortunately, it was shared by the two Shane Duffy and Shane Long, with 5 goals each. With 23 goals, I think, in the Premier League this year, which was a vast improvement on last year. So things are at least trending in the right direction. But the point he was making generally was that the quality of football that we're seeing in the Premier League has got better and better and better year on year as the money has come in and as the league has improved versus the other leagues around the world. So they can sign the best players from the small, mid-ranking Serie A, La Liga and German clubs. And that what we should really be doing is praising anybody who is able to, at this point, maintain a Premier League existence and a contract and a career who is Irish, because the competition is so fierce.
Yeah, it's a great point that Nathan's made, which is unusual for Nathan, to be fair. I think when you factor in all those scouting networks and where they can go and shop now, I think you hit the nail on the head. I've said it before numerous times. It's never been as hard, firstly, to make it as a professional footballer, because of that competitive nature of the industry and how far and wide they can stretch, but also to sustain it at the top level. So it's been well documented about the players, or the lack of players that we have playing at Premier League level. Of course, next year we'll have Sheffield United, 2 to 3 players. If Aston Villa go up, there's another couple. So yeah, look, it's not easy. But if it goes to the side, I'll give it to Shane Duffy because he is centre half.
Fair enough. What was your view on what Dave McIntyre said about Man United and the fact that Solskjaer is a manager who, at this stage, they're not really sure that they want? They really have to double down now and back him, or do they have immediate buyer's remorse and decide, okay, we made a mistake, I'm sure there's some get-out clause early on in that contract, that there's still a possibility they could get somebody who is better and more qualified, somebody like Mauricio Pochettino, who's still making noises that unless the money's coming through from Spurs next year, that he could have his head turned?
Yeah, I think they've got serious financial clout. I don't think that's a problem for them. But I think if they did get rid of Solskjaer, it'd be very, very embarrassing. But do you persevere with someone who is maybe starting to look out of his depth, or do you flip it on its head and go, well, maybe Jose Mourinho had a point? And I certainly didn't think he had at the time. I thought these players were capable of so much more than what they were producing under Jose Mourinho. But maybe he did have a point. There's obviously clear issues. The dressing room needs to be absolutely gutted. So whatever issues are in that dressing room need to be sorted out. Big players, big egos, big personalities, if they're not rowing in the same direction as the manager and the football club, they quite simply need to go. We've said this probably a couple of times at least since Sir Alex Ferguson left the building, that they have to press the reset button. They need to stop chasing the Alex Ferguson dream, because it's not going to happen again. But what they need to do is all get in sync with where they're going as a football club. And I don't think that's happening at the moment. So there's some big calls to be had over the summer.
Like, at what point do you think that the Solskjaer reign will come to an end? Because it's almost accepted at this point that he's right up there in terms of the most likely to be sacked first next season, which seems like an extraordinary thing to say given how he started his reign as United boss.
Yeah, it's bonkers, Owen, isn't it? When you only go back, whatever it was, 6-8 weeks now, and you think, wow, look at what he has produced with this set of players. Look at the run. Look at the style of football. They're playing on the front. They're playing attacking football. They're playing with real pace and energy, something that most of us have been crying out for, and thinking that Martial and Rashford and Lukaku, to the degree that they are capable of this type of football if given a little bit of confidence by the manager. But it's been very alarming what's happened. And obviously, he is the head honcho. He is in charge of that group of players. But those players, there's serious issues there in that dressing room. So it's a massive call. And look, football's a mad world. We've seen Ger and Eoin yesterday go, and people will point to the record over the last, whatever it was, 3 wins in 23. But it's the type of industry where, okay, we'll discuss it for a couple of days, but we quickly move on, and Pochettino could well and truly be in the seat within a week or two. Probably not before the Champions League final.
Yeah. What did you make of the Brighton decision?
Very surprised initially. We're on the pro licence here at the moment, and one of the lads just said, wow, Ger and Eoin's just been sacked. And I just thought, Jesus, like the day after the game, that's just not messing it about. I've spent time at Brighton. I nearly stayed as a coach towards the latter stages of my career. It didn't quite work out. And the owner is very, very ambitious. He probably wasn't content with what they've done this season. And I think when you throw Dan Ashworth into the equation, who's come from being the FA technical director, he arrived in the building at Brighton in January. Straight away, I'm thinking, what is he going to add to the equation? I think he'll definitely improve the recruitment side of things, because I don't think that has worked in the last couple of years. It was even an issue when I was playing there. Some of the players that they've signed for substantial fees, you would have to say, quite simply haven't worked, and it's been the kind of same old faces, some of which have got them promoted, kept them in the league and kept them going. But you do need to add quality, and when your signings don't work, especially the ones that you spend some serious money on, then obviously you live and die by those. And I'm not so sure Chris even had final say on some of those signings, so I would imagine that would be a disappointing part for him.
Yeah. One last thing I just wanted to bring up with you. I know you were obviously at Bolton for a good stretch there at the end of your career. They're going to start in League One with a 12-point deduction next year after going into administration. It kind of is the final nail in the coffin for that club.
Yeah, look, I have to be completely honest here. When I walked in there, I signed a 3-year deal after the Euros in 2012, and after my first training session, I was thinking, oh dear, what have I walked into? It was just not right. The habits of the football club, it was on a massive downward spiral. It had already started. It just been relegated from the Premier League, and everybody assumed Championship football was, this will be a problem, we'll just get straight back up. It's the mentality of the football club. Since then, the types of contracts that they've thrown out, it's just spiraled out of control year on year. The owner that's been in place, Ken Anderson, the way he conducts himself is not particularly nice. I don't think it's very transparent. Takeover, even that muddy water over the takeover with Bassini in recent weeks, the EFL, he's been banned himself. He's just come out of a ban from football, a 3-year ban from his dealings with Watford. And it's a complete mess, because you would have to say that it is one of the old, traditional, historic football clubs in Northern England. And certainly the fans don't deserve what's gone on, but it's been an absolute... I don't know how Phil Parkinson, the manager, has dealt with this. I still know a couple of the players there, and it's been one thing after another. Not getting paid. The whole messiness of it, and for them to even firstly to kept them up last season, and this season just gone. Obviously, he couldn't quite do it, but he's got to be in serious need of counselling, that fella, after what he's had to endure at that place.
When you went in there first day, Keith, you said you kind of realised it was bad straight away. What sort of things did you see? What was the tangible thing that suggested that to you?
Habits, Owen, were the big thing. Bad habits. So we'd gone from West Brom under Roy Hodgson, where everything was meticulous. The football club was run very, very well. Ironically, at that time, Dan Ashwood was the technical director at West Brom under Roy Hodgson. So you're talking two people there that are experts in their field. And that just fed right down into the players. The type of dressing room we had at West Brom was very professional, took pride in what we did. You flipped that on its head, and I walked into Bolton, and it was like walking into Billy Smart's circus. It was just like a boys' club. It was just a bit of a laugh and a joke training around the place, and it was very evident that there was issues at the football club.
Look, we'll wrap it up there. Enjoy the rest of your course. How is the pro licence? Are you a good student, Keith?
What do you think, Jay? Having worked with me for
I'd say you're diligent and hard working.
When you bought us coming in on Thursday.
I'd say you're diligent and hard working. You brought donuts for everybody, but then you were down in the back of the class making wise.
That's not too far off, actually, without the donuts. No, it's been going well. It's day 2 now, but I'm flying off to West Brom Villa tonight. I'll be at the game tonight after they won of the two semi-finals. So I'll do it tonight. I'll be back in time for class tomorrow morning. So that's been good. We get varied speakers in, very talkers, long days. Got a presentation on now at 10 o'clock. My slot is at 10 o'clock, but I've got to be down in the classroom for 9. So, yeah, if you don't mind, I'm going to go down and get some eggs and toast beforehand.
Enjoy it. Best of luck, Keith. Thanks a million, man.
Cheers, lads. Good speaking.
Keith Andrews back with us there, the Ireland 21 coach. We're delighted to bring you our next guest. Michael Lyster is outside. We're going to talk to him straight away. First, though, here's a bit of Tommy Walsh goodness, refuting Owen's claims from earlier on. Here he is, proving that Tom Brady knows a bit more about how to get up for a game than Owen Sheahan. Have a look.
As regards what did Waterford want out of their home ground, was a kind of a hostile, I think it was John Milan speaking about a hostile atmosphere before the game. It definitely wasn't that. A few reasons for that I could imagine, just from playing and being there. First of all, the match was at 2 o'clock, and it was really dead heat at the match. It is sometimes hard to really get into a highly intense physical battle at that stage, because it's still early. It's tiring. The heat drags every bit of energy and saps every bit of energy out of you. Sometimes it is hard. Now, I was listening to Tom Brady give an interview there, the American football quarterback for the Patriots, and he said often when he's not up for a game like that, he shouts and roars and kind of starts jumping around to get himself into it.
Yeah.
He knows his own mindset. Sometimes when he's too hyped up, he relaxes himself, and you won't see him shouting and that. Maybe that's what Watford needed to do yesterday, because I felt to get the home crowd involved, you either have to be leading, which unfortunately they weren't, because Clare got that early goal through John Conlon. So they just really needs to up the ante regards intensity, maybe, even a bit of niggling, a bit of jostling, a bit of shoving. But they weren't involved in any sorts of that. And maybe that's why they just gave the Waterford crowd nothing to cling on to. Like, you can imagine if Nicky was in Nolan Park Saturday night, like, it was much the same atmosphere I felt for Kilkenny, right? Until Gregory Kennedy, I suppose, caught that ball. And unfortunately, that was the Mayor of Fernia. And unfortunately then, the Kilkenny crowd went berserk, starting with Cody on the line. Every time then Gregory Kennedy went out in the field, the crowd were booing. You'd say to yourself, geez, if you're involved in that Kilkenny team now, you'd be over the moon, because the crowd are here behind you, they're here to defend you, and it just gets you really involved, and that's what the home atmosphere is all about. So compare that then to Watford. There was none of that going on. Like, 2 or 3 times a Watford guy even got a belt, and he went down the ground. Now, they won their free, fair enough, but down the ground for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, and it kind of sucks out the energy out of the crowd again. So as he jumped back up on his feet, ran back into his position, suddenly everyone's into the game again and up for it and kind of really rallying behind it. So I think maybe they could learn from that. the next time they have a game in Walsh Park.
Yeah, that's Tommy Walsh giving out some advice to the Waterford hurlers to get stuck in a little bit more and channel their inner Tom Brady. Now, I'm delighted to say Michael Lyster is here with us this morning. How are you doing?
Good morning. How are we all today?
Yeah, very good. How are you getting on?
I'm getting on good. I'm sort of coming down a little bit in the world this week because last weekend I was in Killarney at the Rally of the Lakes fraternising with Michael Fassbender.
Right.
Yeah, we were kind of chilling together,
right,
as you do,
He was driving it, wasn't he?
He was, yeah. Michael was competing in the event. It was the 40th anniversary of the Rally of the Lakes, so he was involved in the rally, driving he brought the car home. That's all you can do for your first ever rally, so fair play to him. But a good guy, nice guy, and he was a great ambassador down there during the week for the rally and all that kind of thing, so that was nice.
His celebrity is like a different stratosphere now. It's kind of reached that kind of, Hollywood A-lister.
Oh, sure, of course. I mean, that's the whole point about it. Like, everybody, and particularly younger people, know who Michael Fassbender is through the movies and all that kind of stuff, and that was a big buzz, as I said, for the rally and for the community down there because, the top drivers within rallying, everybody knows who they are, but outside that, in the wider community, most people don't actually know, but everybody knew who Michael Fassbender was, so, yeah.
Like, if you were asked what your first love is, the answer would really be rallying, right? That's...
From a participation point of view, for sure, yeah. And it's just one of those things. It was a sport that I got involved in, and when I did my first rally, and I only did one rally, and one of the other competitors said to me, "This is a disease, and he was right because 30 years later I'm still involved in it, and that's
How did the first one come about, though? What was the impetus in the first place?
I was when I joined RTE, I was actually covering rallies or covering the Circuit of Ireland anyway, and myself and Vincent Hogan from the Irish Independent, we kind of hang around together in the rallies. We'd be sitting on bar stools in the evening and saying, "Do you know what? We should have a crack at this sometime." So when my old mug got on the Sunday game and all that, I realised I could actually get sponsorship and put the package together financially. So we just decided we would do, if you're going to go rallying and you're going to start off in a sport, it's like you decide to take up hurling. What'll I do? I'll play in the All-Ireland final. Yeah. So we started off, the first rally we did was in the Circuit of Ireland, which we were not entitled to do, by the way, but that's another issue. In terms of our licence, we got a licence. And
it was the 80s.
And off we went, and we competed in the thing. And as I said to you, that was just one of those things. You came away from it and you said, right, when is the next event? When can I get the money together to do something else? And it went on a bit like that.
What is it? The adrenaline rush? Is that what the virus is? Or
it's the adrenaline rush. It is the challenge. It's tough sport, like I suppose most sports are, I guess. But it was also the camaraderie because, guys within the sport of rallying would be very helpful to each other, even though you're competing against guys. I was doing the Galway rally one year, and on the way out from Galway City out to the first stage out near Ardrahan, the clutch went in the car. So we drove the first 3 stages of the rally with no clutch. But what this involved was the guys behind me pushing me off the start line.
Right.
And they all did it. They all gave me the push and got me going and all that. But all I could hear as I was being pushed off the line was mumblings and mutterings of 4-letter words and the fucking and all this kind of. But they pushed. Because what that meant, then they had to jump back into their own cars and get strapped up and go kind of, But I didn't take too much time off them with no clutch, by the way, so they were happy enough from that point of view. So.
I would say so. But it seems like it's quite a complicated sport to learn. So you and Vincent's your co-driver, is he?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he was my co-driver for a lot of my time in rallying, but I had other co-drivers, and obviously Vincent, like myself, I suppose, because of our commitments in sport and at weekends, it wasn't always possible for the two of us to be there. But we did a lot of rallies together, I have to say, over the years, and
that's a weird relationship because you've got to trust. It's like
it is. We've often talked about that. It's a very, very strange relationship in the sense that you so depend on each other. And when I say depend on each other for your safety and everything else, but it's also very intense because you're sitting. I remember doing the Circuit of Ireland one year, and it was the last of the old circuits, which began on Friday and ended on Easter Monday. So that's a long time, and it went all around Ireland and the usual kind of thing. And you're sitting in the car with somebody for 4 days.
Yeah.
After about 2, you're pretty much fed up with each other, kind of, and there were long periods. I mean, if you're on a 70-mile drive to get to the next stage and you're sitting there and the two of you are looking out the window and nobody's really saying anything, because at this stage you haven't got a lot to say anyway, kind of, but so it's that kind of relationship. But But I think we made a good partnership.
And you're still rallying?
I'm still involved in it, yeah. I haven't actually competed over the last couple of years for one reason or another, and health issues being a main reason. But for instance, last weekend down in Killarney, I was doing sweeper car, which is not competing, but it's going around after the field in a rally car. And in rallying, there's this build up and build down. So before the competition cars arrive on the stage, there will be a number of other cars go through, official cars and road safety checks and blah, blah, blah. And then at the other end, it's that same thing. It's a kind of a slowdown so that the people don't get giddy and start walking around in the middle of the road when there's still cars actually coming in, things like that. So that's how I got chatting so much last weekend to Michael Fassbender, because he was running at the back of the field. So at the beginning of stages, you'd be hanging around waiting for things to happen and batting the breeze and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and did he get the bug? Is he going to be an annual?
Well, yeah, I'd say so. I don't know about the bug for rallying, although I suspect he might, but he's actually competed in circuit racing a fair bit.
Okay, right.
Sports car racing. So
Right.
he wasn't a newbie to competing in cars, but a newbie to rallying, it's a different discipline for obvious reasons. It's a bit like saying somebody who's an international rugby player taking up Gaelic football. Okay, you can play football, but can you play Gaelic?
Yeah.
You know, so it was a bit of that kind of thing. But as I said, I was talking to a couple of people who were out watching the stages, and they reported he was giving it welly. So you like to hear that about yourself.
It's gold star. Like, are you interested in the structural side of cars as well? Like,
No.
You don't have a rally car parked up at home?
I was always an arrive and drive competitor.
Right, okay.
Yeah, somebody else prepared the car and I'd sit in it. But don't ask me how it worked. So.
And do you find yourself doing a lot more of that now since the Sunday game is finished up? Is it kind of like the predominant thing that you focus your free time on?
No, not at all. I mean, it's been a hobby, but that's all it's ever been. And there are definitely out there are petrol heads. There are fellas who live and breathe this kind of stuff. You know, I'm definitely not one of them. I enjoy it, and I've enjoyed, we say last weekend, I'm a life member of the Galway Motor Club, so I'd be involved a little bit with them as well. But no, I mean, I can walk away from the thing as well and not bother about it. In actual fact, part of the reason that I haven't competed for a couple of years is I've been too lazy to go about getting my license renewed, which I did let lapse, which was a mistake because I had an international rally license, and I let that lapse, and now I have to kind of go through the process of building it up again. But it's one of those things, you also have to remind yourself that you're actually in your mid-60s, not your mid-20s, kind of, you know, so going around acting the pup in rally cars doesn't go with the scene. But
I'm not sure reminding yourself of your age is actually a good thing anymore. You should just forget about it. Whatever happens, happens.
I have a friend, and she said to me one time years ago, we were talking about this, and she said, if you didn't know what age you were, what age would you think you were? And I think that's one of the best sayings that I've ever heard, because I actually think I'm 25. So in my head, and as my wife often reminds me, I act 25 a lot of the times as well. So
fair play, I say. Fair play. It's that time of year when obviously the Sunday game is back.
Yeah.
How does that feel? Are you missing that a bit?
No, I have to say I'm not. I watched the Sunday game last Sunday. And that's the only dilemma I had was watching the Sunday game last Sunday. I was also trying to watch the Spanish Grand Prix. So I was kind of doing a small bit of flicking for the Waterford-Clare match, and then I watched the Tip Cork match and that. But no, it was perfectly fine. I'm sat at home, I'm watching it. Halfway through the Tip Cork match, I opened a bottle of Peroni, which I couldn't do if I was actually presenting the Sunday game. It's not recommended anyway. But so no, it was fine. I was happy out. There was no problem. As I've said to people, I did it for 35 years. That's a long time.
Yeah.
And I've done my stint. It's not like somebody came along and said to you, listen, thanks for everything, but we found somebody else and we think they're the way to go forward or whatever. I just came to a natural end, and I knew 5 years ago this natural end was coming. So that there wasn't any kind of disappointment in that. And the other thing about it is, now that I'm not in RT and now that I'm not involved with the Sunday game or League Sunday, which has gone before, of course, I have more time to do other things, and I can make commitments to do other things that I wouldn't normally do, because this time of the year you will be pretty much locked in to the programme. There will be a lot of, it's not just a case of rocking up on a Sunday, there will be a lot of production meetings, and I always wrote my own scripts and did my own research and all that kind of stuff. I preferred to do it that way. So that involved a lot of work during the week. So you were doing that and you weren't doing other things, whereas last week, as I said, I was in Killarney at the weekend for the Rally of the Lakes. I was in Cork before that for an Irish Heart Foundation event. I'm going to Sligo this weekend for a CPR launch of a community down in Sligo. And while I'm there, I might just catch the Sligo-Galway match as well, because it's in Sligo, it's in Markovitz Park. So it's a bit like that. You know, you stop doing one thing and you start doing other things.
Yeah. The CPR and the Irish Heart Foundation, these are obviously very important in your life. And, you know, I wonder, a life-changing moment like you have had, what difference does that make to your outlook?
I suppose I'm every day, I think, at some point in the day, I'm conscious of this event that happened to me. This was my cardiac arrest in 2015. And it crosses your mind all the time. But I don't dwell on it, and it isn't something that kind of stands over me. You just get on with your life. I should be dead. I mean, that's not being too dramatic about it. But I'm not. So, you know, you just get on with it.
And just explain to people, because cardiac arrest and heart attack are different things.
Yeah.
Cardiac arrest, you're not supposed to survive.
No, you're not supposed to survive. And I understand totally where this confuses people. I had two events. I had heart failure in 2012, which was physically a more serious scenario because you were in serious physical health trouble at that stage. The cardiac arrest in 2015, your heart just stops. And people would say to me, and how are you since your heart attack? And, you know, and were you feeling bad? You get pains, which is understandable, you know, because that's what happens in a heart attack. You get a blocked artery or some other thing goes wrong in your heart. With a cardiac arrest, something in my brain, the impulses that go from your brain to your heart stop working. And in most people being in about 94%, I think, of people who suffer a cardiac arrest don't survive. And the one or two that do survive, most of them, it happens to them in hospital where they have the medical facilities to possibly revive you. So I'm in that bracket, and it's if you think about it, it's totally freaky. But you could drive yourself crack thinking about it as well. And as I said to you, look at, I got away with it. I'm still alive. I don't know for how long. Let's be honest with ourselves here. The fact that it happened once doesn't mean it'll never happen again, of course. But that's not the point. You just take day by day, and that's all anybody can do. Because one thing that's always struck me since this happened in 2015 is you pick up the papers or you look at your phone app and your news app and things like that, and somebody gets killed in a car crash, or, you know, dies in tragic circumstances like that. And you look at them and you look at the age, and somebody's 23 or 22, whatever the case may be, and you think to yourself, that's too young to die. You know, so you don't know. I mean, you can't protect yourself from the dangers of life, whatever shape they might come in.
Did it go the other way at all, that you're kind of, you know, you're more energized about stuff, going, okay, well, this is a very random second chance that I've been given, and that I should make the most of this now?
There's certainly an element in that. I would always be fairly proactive in terms of doing things and willing to take things on and stuff like that. And I'd always kind of approach life from the point of view of, I'll say yes until I see reasons why I should decline, rather than going the other way around at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I've always been like that, but definitely you're right, there's more of an inclination to engage kind of with, to say about things, look, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll go and do it. Half the times I agree to do things and I'm on my way and I'm like, what was I thinking here? But anyway.
Like you mentioned there the 94% statistic, and that the other 6% are in hospital.
And don't, by the way, anybody with medical expertise start ringing in and saying he's wrong. It could be 92 or it could be 92, whatever. But it's in that bracket a lot.
Yeah, and the fact that the remainder are usually in hospital with the equipment available. Where were you when it happened?
I was at home. I had been playing golf with the aforementioned Vincent Hogan, and I came home, and I collapsed shortly afterwards, but I had actually left my phone in Vincent's car, and I rang him from the house phone, and I just said to him, look, if you're not gone too far down the road, I left my mobile in the car. But I've said this before about it, Vincent had said to me, listen, I'm gone way off down, and can I drop it to you in the morning? There would have been no problem. Would have said fine, because who needs their phone at midnight? I don't anyway. And I collapsed just shortly before he arrived back with the phone, and that was the first lucky break. Obviously, he found me because I had opened the front door and that. And then he called my wife Anne, who was in bed upstairs. She started to do CPR. And this is important to mention in this thing for people. She wasn't trained in it. She just did what she knew somebody ought to do, is do something. So she went to work, and the other lucky break in this thing, I definitely used up all the lotto numbers in this one. The other lucky break was the Loughlinstown Hospital ambulance port is just up the road from our house. So the ambulance was down in less than 10 minutes. I think it was 8 minutes. So you've only got a window of time. There's only so long somebody can do CPR before it's game up. So all these things, and as I said, it's just too weird like to kind of think about. But look, it all happened, and it's actually a little bit like, you know, you're there from one end of the week, well not but whenever you do the lotto, trying to pick the right numbers, and you look at the ticket afterwards and say, gee, I could have got one of them. God, I mean, give me one of them, kind of. You know, I got them all that night.
It's a pretty amazing story, and it's a terrible story, but it's also a really good story.
It's a dramatic story, but it had a good outcome for me, yeah, for sure, there's no doubt, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that it's great that you're involved with charities around the country who are bringing that story to people, like the whole notion about CPR, people not knowing how to do it.
Yeah.
It is something really that we should be teaching everybody, you know, like the basics of this kind of stuff, because whether or not you need to use it, it's not a bad thing to know.
Oh, it's not a bad thing to know, or even just the principles of it. Funnily enough, I am trained in CPR myself, and I have the certificate and all that kind of stuff. Although once you get a collapse of the cardiac arrest yourself, you can't actually do CPR on yourself, so that wasn't any good to me. But the point about it is, even the principles of the thing, people should know the broad principles of it and what to do, and you don't have to do the kiss of life or anything like that. What you do have to do is very aggressive compressions of the chest, and that's to keep the blood flow going. There was a man collapsed in a taxi down the road from RTE a couple of years ago, got a cardiac arrest. There were 4 New York firemen on a break in Ireland coming in a taxi behind, and they knew what to do. They broke 3 of his ribs. But the whole point about it is, and this is part of the principle of it, what's 3 broken ribs if you're dead?
Yeah.
You know, so they revived him, they got him to hospital, everything worked out fine. So his 3 broken ribs were a very minor.
I'm sure he's delighted with them.
Yeah. Delighted with them, exactly, yeah.
Michael, it seems to me that you have an interest in people, that like the stuff about going around the country, and that you're just happy to go and talk to people, and
sure,
that is something that would have, I would say, characterised your presentation style, that you were interested in what was going on, that you had a genuine kind of warmth about it. It never felt like you were going to work. It never felt like you kind of had to. In fairness, some of the panellists down the years were great, so you didn't have to drag too much out of them.
Yeah.
Some of them you had to drag some stuff out of.
Yeah.
But that was kind of, not the philosophy behind it, but that's like the identity of it.
Well, it was my philosophy. And my philosophy about it would be, look, you're presenting a television programme, and there are mechanics that go with it. But I would always make sure, from my point of view, that all the mechanics were done right going to the programme. And I would spend a lot of time during the week on working on that and making sure that I was right in my head where everything was before you showed up in Páirc Uí Chaoimh or Semper Stadium or whatever. And then when you got there, you then had to make sure that you got the balance right between bringing the story of the match and all that, and realising that the Sunday game is an entertainment programme, and it has that element to it as well. And in terms of the panellists, I never had to drag anything out of anybody. The challenge was to shut them up. and it would be quite funny because, you know, people watching the programme, they don't realise that you're wearing an earpiece. And most of the time when Brawley or Spillane or whatever is on a rant, and the director of the programme or the editor of the programme is in my ear, they're going, shut him up, or they then start talking to them even though they couldn't hear them. Brawley, shut up, all right, okay, we get the point, and all this. But of course they can't hear what the director is saying. I can hear it, and I'm there kind of listening to the boys and whatever, and I'm like sometimes that close to bursting out laughing because it's actually quite comical sometimes, you know. And I understand it from the programme producer's point of view. They're watching the clock. They've got to go to an ad break. And as you guys know, with advertisers, if you don't take the break within a certain parameter that the break was promised, then there's a penalty and they get a free couple of ads out of RT or whatever and all that kind of thing. So there'll be all this kind of thing going on in the background, and then you're trying to engage with the lads. But look, that's what the game's all about.
Who was your favourite pundit?
I can't honestly say that from the point of view that I've enjoyed working with them all, although they've all brought their different stuff to the table and their different challenges. But I guess you would always rely on the go-to person in a situation, and the go-to person in the football panel would be Colm O'Rourke. Because no matter what the others will be up to, you know that you could go to Colm for a bit of balance and to settle the thing down. Cyril Farrell of the hurling panellists, I suppose, but that would be a personal thing because I knew Cyril from Galway back in the day when he was the Galway manager, and we kind of travelled in one aspect or another through that journey for him to then become a seasoned panellist on the Sunday game and all that. But look, they've all brought something special to the table, and that's part of what it's all about.
Was there ever a moment when you thought, we're in trouble here, or anything like that?
I'd say every second Sunday, probably, yeah. Well, we were in trouble a few times because some of the things that the fellas have said kind of just, I remember back in the day, going back a fair few years, on the nighttime programme, which I was doing at the time, there was a Ulster Championship match between Derry and Tyrone, and Pat Spillane, it was a fractious encounter, and Pat was doing the analysis of it, and he described the Derry players as thugs in the middle of all this kind of thing. And of course, needless to say, the manure hit the fan, and the Derry County Board are going to sue everybody in sight and blah, 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 whatever. And the following week was a hurling Sunday, but the then head of sport, Tim O'Connor, insisted that Pat come back and apologise and retract this thing, and there was no way Spillane wanted to do this. So he's marched up to Dublin anyway, and I have him before the programme and I'm saying, Pat, look, we're not asking you to change your opinion of the match. We all know it was a fairly tough game and all that kind of thing. The word thugs, I said, this is just a problem. So just that word, just pull that back and we're clear out the door. Is that fair enough? So anyway, introduce him on the programme. Pat, last week's match you had some fairly controversial things to say, and I know you want to address that. So he rattles on about it, and he said, I suppose in the course of the thing I use the word thugs. I accept I use that, and maybe I shouldn't have said that. But I mean, God almighty, they committed criminal acts out there, and After the programme finished, Tim O'Connor was on the phone out in the control room waiting for me, and I picked it, and he was talking for about 10 minutes, but the only thing and the only two words I could understand was, "You're fired! You're fired!" Well, Spillane was then wheeled back for a third occasion, a second go at this thing, and O'Connor has him outside the studio by the lapels. Maybe he didn't have him by maybe he had him by the throat or something, can't quite remember. And say, he had written a script for him. If you change one word of that script, I'll kill you, So that was one of the many, I can tell you, down through the years, and various other things with Brolly and so on.
Yeah. Like the ones that kind of come to mind are kind of the more modern ones, like Tyrone Monaghan in 2013. Obviously, that's somewhere with the Sean Kavanagh incident, and then Puke Football famously.
Of course, obviously, yeah.
Almost as like the 10-year anniversary of Puke Football. Brolly had to outdo it.
I know, but I mean, the thing about it is, going back to the Puke Football, last Sunday on the Sunday game, because it's the 40th anniversary of it, they were doing a montage of various things, and it's not just about a montage of they won a famous All-Ireland here or they won a famous All-Ireland there. Of course, that was part of the package. But guess what? Spillane's Puke Football was in the middle of it there, because that is so much remembered by people. There was another aspect to that on that day. One of the things that Spillane said was, he was talking about Francie Bellew, who was cornerback on the Armagh team at the time, and he was giving Francie a lot of jip. And he said, My mother is quicker than Francie Bellew, and my mother has a bad knee. And the following week, after Armagh won the All-Ireland, Goal used to do this charity match on the Wednesday afterwards and get the All-Ireland champions to play a selection in it. And in fair play to the Armagh guys and Joe Kernan, Joe was a very good humour. He's a very good humour guy and would take the right attitude to it. So what the Armagh players, they all came out on the pitch with their knees bandaged up, which was quite funny, obviously. But, there was all that aspect of the Puke Football, and then various other things, as we said, down through the years, like that have stuck in people's memory and minds about the Sunday game and aspects of it. Yeah. But the other thing I would say about it, and this goes back to the Brolly rant about Sean Kavanagh and all that kind of thing. be it the puke football or the Sean Kavanagh rant or other things that ads have caused controversy about, they were actually, in principle, right in what they were saying. It might have been controversial the way they said it, but the points they were making was valid. And, I mean, after all, that stuff with the Sean Kavanagh thing, it I won't say it caused, but it certainly was a precursor to the black card being introduced into football and all that kind of stuff, you know. And there was definitely validity in what they were saying, although, as I said, the manner in which they said it was another story.
Did you feel pressure about that? Because it's a funny job. The notion of Tim O'Connor being as angry as he was, I can understand. But there was also a sense that you're in a big organisation like RTE and a big organisation like the GAA, and the Director Generals of both organisations have hotlines to each other if and when something happens. Were you conscious of that? Was that something that you kind of needed to, or was it ever said? It was like, look, the GAA are very unhappy with a certain specific line here, and how did that tension manifest itself?
Personally, no, that didn't bother me. I hope, had a sense of responsibility towards the Sunday game and to RTE about what I did as the presenter, and I always just wanted to keep a balance on things, to try and keep a balance on things. But let's face it, I knew when the lads were saying controversial things that it was getting the public going, and it was getting, you know, and you're there thinking to yourself, okay, I need to just keep a balance on this thing, but this is actually good.
Need to let it go too.
Yeah. Who spoke to who afterwards? Who complained to who? That didn't bother me. You know, that was somebody else's problem.
Would you
as long as I felt.
Would it seep down?
No, in fairness, no. I mean, I was never directly told by RTE, don't do this or don't do that or whatever the case may be. But I would be aware, obviously, if there was a hoopla going on between various sporting bodies. In my case, it would be principally the GAA and that kind of stuff. But no, I was never pressurised. And the thing about that is, all that kind of stuff would happen at admin level in the organisation. The people who worked on the programme, be it me or the editor or the producer of the programme, whatever, we operated to make this programme as good as we could possibly make it. And that was our agenda. We couldn't ignore the other agendas that were around it, but at the same time, we pretty much did our stuff and tried to say to ourselves, we're doing a good programme here, the public like it, is there a problem?
Because, you know, rights holders want their, the rights, the owners, they want their product to be promoted as opposed to
they do, but
football.
No, there's no doubt about that. But we are lucky in this country in that the relationship that the national broadcaster has with the major sporting organisations, like, for instance, as we said, in the GAA, there is still a huge amount of editorial control over what we do compared to across channel, for example. The Premier League is so big and it means so much to everybody financially involved in this thing. And what we have to remember when we watch, I was going to say Manchester United, I'm a Manchester United fan, but I'm trying not to watch them at the moment. They're finished for the season, so that makes it easy, I suppose. But the point about it is, this is a global product. You can see Premier League football in South Africa or South America, whatever the case is. And there was so much involved here in it. They can't have digs at each other, and it makes a lot of the analysis of issues within soccer, and there are issues within soccer as the same as there are in GAA or whatever the case may be. It makes it a lot more diluted, in my opinion, and not as strong editorially as it could be, because it's big business. The GAA and RTE, there's a business relationship there, but it hasn't subsumed the editorial side of things.
So when you see stuff like John Horan this week coming out and giving out about RTE picking certain games, what do you make of that?
But I mean, look, that's forever been there, you know, and there's always that kind of thing. I mean, when I started on the Sunday game, we would show one match at the weekend and maybe two if we got lucky, if we got a camera crew to go to a second match and all that kind of stuff. Now, essentially, between the live programme and the nighttime programme, pretty much every match for the weekend is covered in some shape or form, whatever. And you're not going to make everybody happy, you know. And you would get that from the public as well as you'd get phone calls or emails from people. Why in the name of God, why didn't you show Leitrim? Why didn't you, all that kind of thing? But fine. Nothing you can do about that.
Yeah.
So I mean, John has a reasonable point, but at the same time, it's a balancing act between all this stuff.
The issue of the quality of the sport, the football in particular, over the last half decade or so, has reached a point where, for a large portion of it, it's a shadow boxing until we get to an All-Ireland semi-final. And even with the introduction of the Super 8s last year, just the way the structure of it worked, it wasn't great, and it certainly pales in comparison to hurling at the minute. Should we just have tiers? Should we just bite the bullet and change the game?
Yeah, but this is a work in progress. And this is my opinion, right? The GAA are moving towards a Champions League format of the Football Championship. But because the provincial councils are more or less autonomous bodies in terms of the provincial championships, each province has control over that. So there's an issue here. Do you ring them up and say, sorry lads, we're taking the checkbook off you because we're running this thing centrally as a Champions League format? And no, it's not really going to work, you know. So what's happening is the championship is gradually moving towards that end. And we're now getting to a point where, let's face it, the provincial championships are becoming irrelevant. And sometimes going into a new season, like this season, for instance, you have to actually remind yourself, who won the Ulster Championship last year?
Yeah.
You know, whereas like 30 years ago, that wasn't a problem because the 4 provincial winners would be in the All-Ireland semi-final. Whereas now this thing is diluted into what's the Super 8s now in football and all that kind of stuff. So where this structure is at the moment isn't the right place, but it's a step along the way towards getting to the right place. But that has to be a process. I understand the GAA's structuring of this thing and the challenges that they face in getting there. But they will. And as I said, I have no inside information on that, but I'd say I wouldn't be too far right from being right.
Yeah.
One of the issues with the second tier competition has been the idea of coverage for it. Like, where do you come down on that? I mean, does the whole idea of it get completely lost, that ultimately RTE or whoever the rights holders are will just end up showing the top tier and the tier 2 will get ignored?
Look, again, I make the comparison to football across channel. When I started watching Match of the Day and stuff like that, I have to say some of it was great because you'd see matches of teams, Shrewsbury Town baiting the living daylights out of Bolton Wanderers or whatever the case may be, on mucky pitches and small stadiums, and it was full of atmosphere, but it was very kind of local kind of stuff. Whereas now, when was the last time you saw Shrewsbury Town on the telly? Not recently, I know. So yeah, and that happens in sport. You know, the bigger the sport gets and the bigger the top guys get, and even within the Premier League itself, the difference between the top half of the table and those who are going to struggle, and they're going to struggle before they kick a ball in the season. You know, that's just a reality of it. And from their point of view, the lower teams, all they're hoping for is to get into the Premier League for a season or two, like Brighton, for instance, who obviously sacked their manager, which is very surprising. But at least they're playing top-level football, so they're in the kitty, and that means a lot to them. But where's the television revenue? It's in Liverpool and Manchester City and Manchester United, and that's just it, you know. And that applies to all the other sports. That applies to rugby as well as everything else.
Michael, before we let you go, are the Dubs going to do 5 in a row? What will stop them?
Stats. That's the only thing at this stage. If you look at, for instance, Eugene McGee passed away recently, and of course the Offaly in '82 stopping Kerry from doing the 5 in a row. I remember the only time that I saw Kilkenny hurling in the county being bullish about the game was the Drive for 5 a few years ago. They're very passionate about their hurling, obviously, in Kilkenny, but they're also kind of, you know, they don't go around banging drums.
They're
about
humble.
it and, you know, humble about it and measured and all that kind of thing. But that particular year, I noticed driving around the county, going down through every village or every town, the flags were out, and the signs were out, the Drive for 5, and that didn't happen. And there's history there in other sports, that kind of stuff as well. Does that mean that Dublin can't win it? No, it doesn't. They're in a great position. It's I suppose people would say at this time of the championship, it's theirs to lose. Is that
the weight of history, or is that the power of expectation? Is it, you know, you kind of...
I suppose the more the further you go, the further out you press the button, you're always going to, it's like a horse going around the Grand National. If there was one more fence, he might fall at it. Do you know what I mean? So there's always that issue. It's a tough thing. It's not easy to win a championship, no matter how good you are and how good Dublin are, and they are good, and they have a good structure, and they have a great manager, obviously, and Jim Gavin and all that. But it's not. They're not going to sail through this thing, you know. Yeah. And I would also make the point to people, in that 4 that they've won already, 2 of those they beat Mayo by a point, and one of them after a replay. And the replay, as we know, Mayo basically beat themselves on it. So it's not like that they've stretched away into the distance. They've edged it by that much. Will they edge it by that much again? Let's see.
As a Galway man, would you like to see Mayo be the ones to stop them?
Do you know what? I genuinely have said this. If Galway were not to win the football championship, which I think is a fair prospect at this moment in time, I wouldn't object at all to seeing Mayo win it.
Right.
The only thing about it at this stage is I think they've lost their chance. I think the chance was there for them a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. I'm not sure how many times Mayo can keep going to the well. And with the group of players they had an All-Ireland winning team. They had the players there. Do they still have the players? They will be contenders. They'll be there and thereabouts. But that's just the structure of the championship. But do they have enough to get themselves to the top step? Wouldn't be sure.
On that note, Michael, thanks a million for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of the off-season. We're going to bring sports news next. Mark Lawrenson told Monday Nights Off the Ball why Liverpool should have no regrets after a stunning title run-in.
If there was one moment you could have back in the season, Mark, what would it be? Come on.
None of that. Do you know why? City lost 3 games. Don't you think they'd won all them back? So there's no such thing in football. It's like saying if your auntie had a pair of what's her name, she'd be your uncle, wouldn't she?
Yeah, but going through the ifs and buts of a Premier League season, that's half the fun.
Well, it's half the fun, but it's not relevant, is it? Because everyone's gonna lose games and everyone's gonna draw games, etc. So you can't point to any one particular game. And if you really push me, I would say, I don't know if you remember when City beat Liverpool at the Etihad. After about 10 or 15 minutes, Mane hit the post. Liverpool was 7 points clear, and if that had gone in, I think Liverpool would have won the league. But it's not. It's what's the point? And Klopp makes a point every time that they drop a couple of points. He says, "Well, I can't get them back. What do you want me to do about it?" And you know what? He's absolutely right. You do have to move on, and obviously, it's the total that's far more important than anything.
That Liverpool City game at the Etihad, it was around Christmas time, wasn't it? Or maybe a bit in January. Oh, it was just an amazing game of football as well.
I think it was the best game of football last year in the Premier League.
Yeah.
Same. I mean, the level at which both teams played, and I think actually Klopp got a bit of criticism because he played the 3 boys in midfield and said they were a little bit negative, etc. But as I say, that Mane scored and really he should have scored, and who's to say? But you've just got to forget about those things. It is what it is. It's the waves wash over and all that.
Yeah, but still, heartbreak is heartbreak, right? Not right, Phil? Heartbreak is heartbreak.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
There was a brilliant moment in the commentary at the game the other day, and Jonathan Walters just turns around to Nathan and goes, "And who do you support, Nathan?" And Nathan goes,
Football.
Was that Jonathan Walters asking a question he knew the answer to?
I think it might have been, yeah.
I suppose Jonathan Walters was let into Anfield, such was his record against Liverpool.
Is he an Everton fan?
Yeah.
He is, yeah.
Yeah, but he had a brilliant record against Liverpool.
At Anfield as well.
Yeah, although I do remember missing a penalty there.
He looks totally different with hair. Have you like that's Johnny Walters. He's looking well.
I could put a wig on, it changes your complexion,
We should try that. We should just have a whole week of Phil's wigs.
Sure, we could get a sponsorship deal there, yeah.
What have you got for us, Phil?
Well, 24 hours ago, I sat here talking about how Manchester City were the Premier League champions, and here we are now talking about UEFA and Manchester City because they're looking into banning City from the Champions League for breaching financial fair play regulations.
I mean, that's not enough, though. You have to strip a team. If a team has benefited from overspending, and so they're not going to ban them for the overspending. They're going to ban them for how they lied about their overspending if what today's New York Times story is true. But you've got to strip them of whatever they've won with the ill-gotten gains.
So what you're saying is Liverpool are the Premier League champions?
No champion this year. They're like those Tours de France that Lance still has.
Those 7.
It'd just be Pep lying down on his couch with all his Premier League titles. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it when I see it anyway. But the New York Times is reporting that an investigation will conclude in the coming weeks and is set to recommend a ban from the Champions League for at least one season. Both UEFA and the Premier League launched an investigation earlier this year due to the allegations in German magazine Der Spiegel, and the club broke FFP rules and states that the rules are that you can only spend what they earn, and City were shown to be receiving money from various companies in the UAE where their owners are from, and these were masked as legitimate sponsorship deals. City deny any wrongdoing, but if a ban was imposed, they would appeal the decision. Every day Manchester City tweet out stories that make the back page headlines. So why are Manchester City in the news today? So I clicked in on it today. I was like, oh, yeah, there's Atletico Madrid, Rodri. Yeah, he's a target. Yeah, City have watched Frankfurt striker Luka Jovic. Yeah, interest in Benfica's João Felix, the 19-year-old. There's talk of the FA Cup final this weekend against Watford. Nothing though of UEFA.
They just don't have a New York Times subscription.
No, maybe.
Or Sun, because it's on the back page of the Sun as well. So.
Well, from one Manchester club to another, I think it's fair to say United have had a dismal season. Their former defender Patrice Evra believes his friend and current United midfielder Paul Pogba will leave this summer, and he thinks Pogba gets unfair treatment from the fans.
I know you can maybe question sometimes his leadership and everything. Maybe the last few games you want Paul to score the winning goal, so that's why maybe people criticize Paul right now. But he's been the best player of the season. But just because it's Paul Pogba, he's doing his haircut, his dance, his Instagram and everything, people will just criticize him, but they forget the player it is.
You have two options. You sell Paul Pogba and you cash in, you move on, you get a different ear, or you sign somebody who you know can play right beside him and give him a different role. So, like, do what they do at France, do what they did at Juve, and don't expect him to be the only player and put another bunch of players around him who are that quality, or you take the 150 or the 100 million or the 200 million, whatever it is that you're going to get, and you move on.
Yeah, I think just take the money, because they don't have that time to basically accommodate him straight away. There's going to be a lot of hurt in the next couple of seasons before United start seeing
Can you not just
real
sign
results.
Can you not just sign Koulibaly and N'Golo Kante, and suddenly your defence is decent, like it's a double
Who
whammy
does
for your
Koulibaly
defence.
play with though? Jones or Smalling?
Well,
Lindelof?
I mean, maybe you sign another centre back too.
Is Chelsea to Manchester United really the career move at this point?
Well, it's a money move. You're just moving it for money.
Yeah, plus, I mean, Kante is probably pissed off with the way he's been used at Chelsea.
Yeah, so it's like he is an option now where he wouldn't have been 12 months ago, right?
Sure. I'm sure Kante's delighted to be a bit more advanced. Chance to play a bit closer to goals.
Scored a few goals. Yeah, not prolific anyway. But big game tonight in the Championship playoffs, the semi-final second leg between West Brom and Aston Villa. First game was a cracker. Villa won 2-1. They came from behind, and Dwight Gale was sent off in that game, so he's suspended for West Brom. And kick-off at the Hawthorns is 8 o'clock. Dublin hurling selector Greg Kennedy could be facing a lengthy ban for interfering with play during the Leinster Championship clash between Dublin and Kilkenny at Nolan Park last Saturday. The GAA's Central Competitions Control Committee are investigating why Kennedy intercepted a TJ Reid free, which had been aimed for Billy Ryan, but the referee had his back turned. He was speaking to a Dublin player at the time, and Brian Cody after the game described it as a bizarre incident. Nolan Park is the venue tonight for Kilkenny and Kildare in the Leinster Minor Football Championship. A win for Kildare will guarantee top spot in Group 3 and a place in the semi-finals. That one throws in at 7 o'clock. 1 o'clock is the start time for Michael Conlon's press conference in Belfast today. Bob Arum, the head of Top Rank, is going to be there.
All right.
This is a big deal, and it's all because Conlon's going to have a big homecoming later this year against an opponent we all remember. 2016, the Rio Olympics, Michael Conlon up against Vladimir Nikitin. We know Conlon was controversially beaten, missed out on a place in the semi-finals. So the talk is August 3rd, a rematch in the pro ranks. Conlon has won 11 from 11, 6 KOs. Nikitin, only in the early stages of his pro career, hasn't really done much to impress.
I mean, let's face it, he was bought for this fight and this fight alone.
Yeah,
right.
This is redemption. This is Conlon's chance to bring Nikitin over to Belfast, give him a pasting, and everyone goes home happy.
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, that's what we want to see happen.
Like, part of me has a little bit of sympathy for Nikitin here. Like, the fellow who gets absolutely battered, even though, again.
He couldn't fight the next fight.
Yeah.
Tried to fight Shakur Stevenson.
Like, obviously, Conlon's ire wasn't even directed towards Nikitin afterwards, and it was towards everybody else. And I guess it is easy that it is the fella who benefited from this absolutely embarrassing decision that he would fight again, and it's an easy person to hold up. But I'm sure part of him is thinking, I wasn't actually the judge here.
Didn't he get a free car out of it, Nikitin? Didn't Putin give them all the
medals?
They got medals, a car. So
yeah, I'm sure he was just a pawn in massive the tectonic plates of geopolitics were at play for Nikitin, and now he's getting a payday.
Yeah, I'd say I wouldn't feel too sorry for him. I'd say he's getting well paid.
If you're him, do you come out and just play the villain and go, I think I won that fight?
Yes, you rock up with your Olympic medal. Yeah. That's what you do.
Yeah, that's a good
idea. Just turn off with your Olympic medal.
You open your thing and you're like, go to the crowd like it's proper WWE. That's what, absolutely. Because otherwise, what is this apart from a tomato can for Michael Conlon? We feel like it is, right?
Yeah, well, there's great things expected from Conlon. He's still, he's with Adam Booth at the moment, and from talking to Andy Lee, who's obviously been trained by Adam before, it takes time to kind of get his ideas on board. So gradually we're going to see more and more improvement. But when he went pro, we all thought, he's going to be a future world champion. Yeah,
quicker than maybe it has appeared now.
Yeah, well, we're starting to see a lot more of this in the pro ranks. The Ukrainians are the best at it. They just go in for world title fights quick enough because they had such good amateur careers. And Conlon had an unbelievable amateur career. He won.
So are you surprised he's at this stage? Is this a bit of a tangent to bring him home, or is this let's establish what the box office will be from a home event and see where his value actually is? Because has he taken over enough in America that we would have expected? Is he making enough money for Bob Arum, basically?
I think he makes money for the Patrick's Day weekend stuff, but I mean, an Irish fighter fighting in New York on St. Patrick's weekend, it's always going to be a money maker. So yeah, I think they're certainly going to, I'd say Bob Arum will be impressed with what he sees on August 3rd with the support that Michael Conlon is going to have. And maybe he might be forced to rethink, where do we start putting Conlon's fights?
Yeah.
Do we...
Because you could get a European title fight next if you wanted, couldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So do you want him to fight in Belfast, or do you want him stateside? Or you can do both. I mean, you can do the New York on St. Patrick's weekend.
Yeah.
And you can have him fight in Belfast. And, he's talked about fighting the likes of Josh Warrington, who won his world title against Lee Selby at Elland Road.
Right.
So, that's the kind of crowds that these guys are able to draw.
And is that a fight that he would expect to win, or...?
Well, he'll tell you to win any fight. I don't know. We talked about this before with Andy, and he said maybe a year, he's talking about this year or in the next year, but maybe give it a couple of years before he's really ready.
What age is he?
Conlon is he 28, exactly? Is he?
91, yeah, so he's 28. He's 28 in November. So, still plenty of time.
Absolutely, yeah. That press conference, by the way, is 1 o'clock today, and Conlon tweeted about it yesterday. He's since tweeted or there's been confirmation that it's going to be at 1 o'clock today, but he said that he's pretty sure everyone is going to be happy with this one. Yeah. So we know it's Nikitin, but it will be official at 1 o'clock today in Belfast.
Is it going to be in the Odyssey? Is that what we expect?
Oh, sorry, it's going to be at Belfast Falls Hall Park, so it's outdoor.
All right, Falls Park. Right, wow.
Yeah. A 10-rounder featherweight. So, big crowd expected at it. Just quickly before I finish up, 2017 champion Justin Thomas has withdrawn from this week's USPGA Championship due to a wrist injury. Masters champion Tiger Woods is going for his 16th major title in a row. Rory McIlroy, Paul Ray Carrington, two former previous winners, are also in the field, as well as are Shane Lowry and Graham McDowell. And I don't know if you've seen, I came in here today, you need a pep in your step sometimes early in the morning, and then you see Mike Dean. Mike Dean puts a smile on my face all the time. The Premier League referee was spotted celebrating his beloved Tranmere Rovers making it to the League 2 playoff final.
Hang on a second, is he the only one standing up on the...
Yeah.
Wow, it's
safe standing.
Is it a look at me moment from Mike Dean? It's not,
yes.
Is it?
Yes.
As this massive thing happens, it's not Mike Dean being the centre of attention, is it? No.
You couldn't dare
that's
speak
not
for
Mike
him.
Dean, that's somebody else.
He was shown multiple times during the game.
Yeah.
Usually it goes to I don't know, Lawrence Fishburne or some Hollywood celebrity or something in the crowd. And this time, when it comes to Tranmere, It's Mike Dean.
He's all on board. He's chanting away. I'd say he's already got his ticket for the Wembley showdown against Newport County. Bit of Irish interest there, and like I think there is a DVD there. Like he got the 100 red card this season. Ashley Young.
Well, being Liverpool, that was the Brendan Rodgers.
Yeah, being Mike Dean.
Or just add him to the 100 Club on Sky Sports.
I would watch that.
Yeah, so would I.
That's a good idea, lads. That's the best programming idea you've ever had.
Well, yes, by some distance.
Between that and the Olympic medal today from the Keaton, I think we've excelled.
Good stuff, Phil. Thanks very much. That is pretty much all we've got time for on this morning's show. It's 9:30, and we've enjoyed it. We hope you have too. Tomorrow morning we'll be back with some analysis and reaction to the Championship playoff semi-final and everything else that's going on in the world. Have you got anything coming up?
Do I have anything coming up in in my life in general, or coming up in this week, or
work related?
Work related.
In the work environment that we're in at the moment.
There is plenty more to come this week. Tomorrow morning we'll be talking to Dermot Ling, so that'll be a good start to tomorrow's show.
You should sell to Off the Wall.
Oh yes, sorry, Off the Wall is up online on YouTube. It's on podcast as well, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Spoilers everywhere in it.
What is it?
It's our Game of Thrones show with Andy Lee. Andy Lee, the super fan, the Game of Thrones super fan, has read all the books, has had some very mixed reviews of this season of Game of Thrones. I'm not going to spoil what he says in the latest episode, but
they will spoil the show for you, though.
They will 100% will spoil the show, but I can't possibly say what Andy Lee's got to say about Monday night's episode because it was crazy.
All right, good stuff. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. #OTBAM. Best of luck.